The first thing people noticed about the girl was her calm, not the rehearsed. Customer service calm that came from memorized smiles and scripted greetings. This calm felt different, quiet, steady, as if somewhere inside her lived a patience that the world hadn't managed to break. Her name was Emily Carter, and on most days, she moved through the narrow aisles of Café Brielle with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned that life rarely waited for you to catch up. The cafe sat on a busy street in downtown Boston, tucked between a bookstore and a tailor shop that smelled faintly of old wool. It wasn't fancy, but the locals loved it. Warm lights glowed in the windows. Soft jazz played in the background, and the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee wrapped around customers the moment they walked through the door. Emily had been working there for 3 years. Not because it had been her dream, but because dreams sometimes had to wait. She tied her apron behind her back, balanced 3 plates along her arm, and moved toward a table near the window. "Here we go," she said gently, setting down the dishes. "Chicken panini, tomato soup, and the blueberry scone." "Thank you, sweetheart," the older woman at the table said with a grateful smile. Emily nodded politely and turned toward the counter just as the door chimed. A man stepped inside. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about him. He looked to be in his late 60s with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His coat was simple, charcoal gray, the kind you might see on any retired professor walking through a university campus. But there was something about the way he moved, slow, observant, that made Emily glance at him twice. He paused just inside the door, taking in the cafe like someone studying a painting. Then he walked to the corner table. Emily grabbed a menu and approached him. "Good afternoon," she said with her usual warm tone. "Welcome to Café Brielle." The man smiled politely. "Good afternoon." His accent was subtle but noticeable. European. Emily handed him the menu. "Can I start you with some coffee?" He looked down at the menu for a moment before speaking. Then he said something that made Emily blink. "Un café noir, s'il vous plaît. Et peut-être une omelette aux champignons." It was French. Perfect, fluid French. Emily's brain caught up half a second later. Most people would have simply apologized and asked him to repeat the order in English. Instead, Emily answered without hesitation. "Bien sûr, monsieur. Vous voulez aussi du pain grillé avec ça?" The man's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You speak French," he said, switching back to English but sounding amused. "A little," Emily replied with a modest shrug. "Where did you learn?" "Community college classes," she said, "and a lot of late-night YouTube lessons." The man studied her for a moment longer than most customers would. Then he smiled again. "In that case," he said, switching back to French, "I will trust your recommendation for dessert." Emily didn't miss a beat. "La tarte au citron?" she replied. "Our lemon tart is the best thing on the menu." He chuckled. "Then lemon tart it is." Emily walked back to the kitchen feeling oddly energized. It wasn't every day she got to practice French outside her tiny apartment while watching language videos with subtitles. 10 minutes later, she returned with his coffee. He was sitting quietly, watching the street outside the window. "Votre café," Emily said gently. He looked up with another small smile. "Merci." For the next half hour, the cafe filled with the usual lunch rush. Plates clattered. Customers chatted. The espresso machine hissed like a small angry dragon. Through it all, Emily kept moving, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, delivering food with the quiet focus of someone balancing a dozen small responsibilities. When she returned with the lemon tart, the man had finished his omelet. He looked genuinely pleased. "That was excellent," he said. "I'm glad you liked it." He took a bite of the tart and nodded approvingly. "You were right." Emily laughed softly. "I usually am." The man leaned back slightly, studying her again. "You're not from Boston originally." She shook her head. "Ohio. And what brought you here?" Emily hesitated, then gave the short version she gave most customers. "School. I wanted to study languages." "And now you serve coffee." She shrugged lightly. "Tuition bills don't care about dreams." The man didn't laugh. Instead, he watched her carefully. "And your dream?" "To become a translator," she said simply. "Maybe work internationally someday." She expected the usual polite response. Something like, "That's nice," or "Good luck with that." Instead, the man asked quietly, "Why French?" Emily glanced around the cafe for a moment before answering. "My mom loved it," she said. "She used to play old French movies when I was a kid." Her voice softened. "She passed away a few years ago. Learning the language kind of makes me feel closer to her." The man nodded slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then a customer at another table waved. Emily smiled apologetically. "Duty calls?" "Of course." 2 hours later, the lunch rush finally slowed. The man was still sitting at his table, calmly finishing his coffee. Emily brought the check. "Whenever you're ready." He accepted the bill and pulled out a small leather wallet. When he handed it back, something else was tucked beneath it. A folded piece of paper. Emily assumed it was a note about the service. She thanked him and cleared the table. He stood, slipping his coat on. "Emily," he said. She looked up, surprised he remembered her name. "Yes? It was a pleasure meeting you today." "You too." He hesitated, as if considering something. Then he simply nodded and walked out into the busy Boston afternoon. Emily watched him disappear down the sidewalk. Then she opened the check presenter. Inside was the payment, a generous tip, and the folded paper. She opened it absent-mindedly. At first, she thought it was just a handwritten note. Then she saw the printed logo at the top, an airline. Her heart skipped. The note read, "Emily, your kindness, your curiosity, and your courage to chase a dream reminded me of someone I loved very much. Enclosed is a ticket to Paris. Consider it an investment in your future. Daniel Laurent." Below the note was an airline ticket. Boston to Paris, round trip. Emily's hands started shaking. "Is everything okay?" her coworker Sarah asked from the counter. Emily looked up slowly. I think someone just gave me a plane ticket." Sarah laughed. "Sure they did." Emily turned the paper so she could see. Sarah leaned closer. Then her eyes widened. "Oh my God!" At the bottom of the note was a name Sarah recognized instantly. Daniel Laurent, the billionaire founder of Laurent Global Hotels. A man who owned luxury resorts across 3 continents. Emily stared at the note again. Her mind raced. Why would someone like that give her a ticket? Then she remembered the way he had listened when she talked about her dream. Not politely, not casually, but like it mattered. Later that evening, Emily stepped outside the cafe after her shift. The Boston air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. She held the note in both hands. The city lights shimmered along the street. For the first time in years, the distance between where she was and where she wanted to be didn't feel impossible. It felt reachable. Sometimes the world changes because of huge, dramatic events. But sometimes it changes because a stranger notices something small. A conversation, a kindness, a dream spoken out loud. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone who has the power to open doors decides to open one just for you.